Hello, it's Larissa Coe. I'm going to read through this article with you and try to give you some tips and tricks for understanding how to read a nonfiction text like this, and then how to fill in the notes. So I found this research article through Gale. It's called "It's Not Just You, American Adults Are Increasingly Anxious." So I've already kind of skimmed through this, and I know that this pertains to the topic that I'm going for. So I know I'm going to use this source, or at least I think I am. So the first thing that I'm going to do actually is get the link, the citation, and an in-text citation, so that I don't have to worry later about citing my sources, or like, oh, I was going to use this quote, but now I can't find the source again. That would be pretty annoying. So I'm going to start with the boring stuff so that I can get into reading the essay and not worry about it anymore. So on Gale Power Search, it gives you already citations. For Gale, they're all the way at the bottom. In EBSCO, if you're using that, it's there's a button that says cite, and that'll give it to you. So we have all of these different formats to cite in. We're doing an MLA paper, so it's going to be an MLA citation as well. So I've got this. I will just copy it, and then I'm going to paste it right here. So there is my citation for my first source. Now, when it says link, you don't want to just take the URL because you won't actually be able to get back to it that way. What you need to do instead is go here to get link, and this will give you a permalink, or a link that will actually lead back to where you're trying to go when you click on it again later. So I clicked select. I should copy it, so copy. And I'll paste the link right here where it says link. So right now, if I click this, it's still not actually linking. All that I have to do is go to this, hit Control K, and now it is a link. Control K is the shortcut for making something into a link. If you're using an Apple computer or a Mac, you would do Command K, and it would do the same thing. So now when I click on this, it has this over here. If I go to it, it'll bring me back to this source in case I want to come back to it again later. Okay, next is our in-text citation. So to create an in-text citation, all you need to do is put the author's last name in parentheses. And that's all that I need for that. If your source ever does not have an author stated anywhere, what you'll do instead is take the title and just put a shortened version of it in parentheses. So if I didn't have the author's name, I would do "It's Not Just You." That way, when someone is looking at the quotes that you use, they'll know where to look in your works cited page so that they can see what your source was. Okay, moving on. So remember, our prompt is, why is anxiety increasing? What can we do to help? So I put together this page just to help you to organize your thoughts and organize your quotes. This first section is for the research. The next section is for the outline. I'm not going to worry about the outline just yet. I'm going to focus on my research section. Okay, here we go. So just so you know, you can tell where the source is from up here. This is from the Washington Post, a newspaper. You can say the date that it was published. So July 10th, 2019 was pretty recent. And you can see the type, which is article, the length, and kind of the level of difficulty. The bigger the number here, the more difficult it's expected to be to read. So when you're reading nonfiction informational texts, a lot of times the vocabulary is kind of difficult to understand. So while I'm going, I don't want to get tripped up and kind of hang on every single word that I don't understand. But if there seem to be important ones, then I can stop and look them up or try to figure out what they mean from context clues so that I don't get stuck while I'm reading. Okay, here we go. We live in an age of anxiety. As a psychologist who has studied anxiety and treated hundreds of anxious patients, I see it eclipsing all other problems as a major psychological issue in the 21st century. Each day, I treat people who worry constantly and can't relax, who feel tense and achy, and who have difficulty sleeping, all hallmarks of anxiety. Survey data confirm anxiety is ubiquitous. So there are two words in this section that I don't understand. Even though I don't understand eclipsing and ubiquitous right off the bat, I can still get a general feel for this paragraph, that it's saying that she's a psychologist and she has treated a lot of patients. A lot of them worry constantly and can't relax and feel tense and achy. So even without understanding those words, I can get a pretty good idea of what this is saying. But if I wanted to, I could look at it. I see it eclipsing all other problems as a major psychological issue. So maybe I could fill that in. I can see it being found with other problems, or maybe being related to other problems. Those are just some guesses by trying to fill in this word with a different word. I can also, of course, just look it up. So copy it, define eclipsing, obscure the light from or to, or deprive of significance, power, or prominence, or obscure or block out light. So it's almost talking about it kind of being filled with darkness or depriving. I would say it's more of the filling with darkness than the depriving, because I don't see anxiety as depriving all other problems as a major issue, but maybe it would make them darker or make them even worse. And then ubiquitous, I can look that up as well. Present, appearing, and found everywhere. Okay. So this is saying survey data confirm anxiety is everywhere. Okay, moving on. Nearly 1/3 of American adults say they feel more anxious than a year ago, according to a May poll from the American Psychiatric Association. The number of Google searches including anxiety has increased steadily over the past 5 years, according to Google Trends. And the National Institute of Mental Health reports that anxiety disorders have become the most common group of mental disorders, with about 1/5 of U.S. adults struggling with an anxiety disorder each year, and almost 1/3 experiencing an anxiety disorder during their lifetimes. So this is a lot of interesting information. I don't think any of them answer my questions of why is it increasing or what can we do to help, but I do think that this could give some good background and kind of highlight the importance of the issue. So I think I'll throw it into the other quotes. You may want to use column. I'm going to pull kind of the most interesting part. I think all of this illustrates the problem, but I want the evidence that is the strongest, and I don't want a quote that's just so long. So let me see what I want to pull out of here. I think the best part is with about 1/5 of U.S. adults struggling with an anxiety disorder each year, and almost 1/3 experiencing an anxiety disorder during their lifetimes. This is the result that is the most shocking to me of all of these things, and so I'm going to choose that. So I'll just copy it and paste it in here. So I always want to put quotation marks around my quotes. I'll delete the period because remember the period goes after the in-text citation. And then in here, I'm going to put the in-text citation. I'll even just copy and paste that because it's kind of a harder name. So there we go. I have my quote. I have my in-text citation. And I just realized I put it in the wrong place. So I'm going to move it down here in my other quote section. There we go. Okay. Okay, moving on. Why is anxiety increasing? Okay, I definitely think that this is going to help answer my first question of why is anxiety increasing? It's literally the same question. This is good. I see plausible explanations in the way we've evolved and paradoxically in the way we try to manage anxiety. These explanations can point us towards several powerful techniques that can reverse the trend of rising anxiety. So this looks like more of an introduction to it's kind of saying now I'm going to tell you the reasons. And so I'm not going to take a quote from this. I'm going to keep reading to see what the reasons are. Okay, we have a title right here, Evolutionary Mismatch. I think that's going to be one of the reasons that this author gives. And then I see that it's kind of repeated right here. What you resist persists, and then remedies. So I think that these two sections are both going to help answer the question of why is anxiety increasing. So I'm going to try to pull something from here if I find it. Evolutionary mismatch, I don't know what that means, so I'm not going to pull that as a quote. I'm going to wait till I find something that gives me more information and background, because if I don't understand that while I'm reading this, whoever reads my essay isn't going to understand it either, most likely. Okay, here we go. Humans have evolved over millions of years to be good at detecting threats in the environment. Ancestors who excelled at fighting or fleeing from dangerous situations were more likely to survive, and we have inherited their genes. Living in the developed world does not typically bring us into constant contact with life-threatening danger, but our threat detection system remains vigilant, and it's being bombarded as never before. Okay, these two ideas go together because it's like we've inherited the genes of ancient ancestors. And it's talking about how in their lifestyle, they had to do a lot of fighting and fleeing because they were in a lot of dangerous situations that were threatening their life and they were trying to survive. Okay, so we inherited their genes, but living in the developed world typically does not bring us into constant contact with life-threatening danger. So now we live kind of cushier lives. We don't actually have to run away from tigers and things like that. And here we go, but our threat detection system remains vigilant, and it's being bombarded as never before. I think this might be a good quote, but I'm going to keep reading on to see if there's more information about it. Okay, we live in constant state of threat owing to the 24-hour news cycle and digital interconnection, said David Sloan Wilson, professor of biology and anthropology at Binghamton University and president of the Evolution Institute. Whether it is in reaction to another photo or article about a recent shooting, grounded planes, trade wars, or the latest stroller recall, our anxiety has constant opportunity to flare up. Okay, I'm going to zoom in a little bit so you can see better. I probably should have done that earlier. Okay. So it looks like this professor is saying that the news cycle and kind of having constant information of bad things going on gives us a lot of opportunities to feel anxious. I'm going to read on. Our lives differ dramatically from our ancestors in other ways. Hunter-gatherers were much more active, walking to find food or shelter, running from predators, climbing, lifting heavy objects, and fighting. They followed rhythms of nature and slept when the night fell. And they belonged to small, tight-knit communities or extended families. In contrast, we move less, sleep less, and have weaker bonds, all of which can lead to anxiety. Okay, this is interesting. So it's saying another difference, other than no longer having constant threats, is that we also move less, sleep less, and have weaker bonds with other people. I think that this is a good quote. I think that's something interesting that I want to focus on in my further research as well. And I'm going to include this. So in my question, why is anxiety increasing? I'll add this quote. And again, my in-text citation is the author's last name in parentheses. Okay, moving on. In contrast, we move less, sleep less, and have weaker bonds, all of which can lead to anxiety. Many of us are like animals in captivity, said Kelly Wilson, a psychology professor at the University of Mississippi. When you immobilize rats and other animals, you can basically create a state of anxiety and depression. Okay, so this professor is giving an example or evidence to support this claim that moving less will lead to greater anxiety and depression. She's saying that they've tested rats and other animals and found out that they also got anxious and depressed when they were stuck. This might be a good place to look for my next source. Maybe I could look up Kelly Wilson and try to find this article or study about rats and other animals and try to get more info about that if I wanted to go that route. Okay, next paragraph. The length and quality of our sleep have been compromised by light-emitting devices, information overload, and societal standards. Okay, so let's break this down. This one is talking about sleep. So when it's saying the length and quality of our sleep has been compromised, it's almost like they've been given up they've been kind of given up in favor of other things deemed more important. So light-emitting devices, so that would be things like tablets, computers, and phones, I assume. Information overload, okay, limitless information at our fingertips. And societal standards. Okay, so let's see what she's saying about societal standards. Many of my clients comment that they feel guilty or lazy for sleeping longer than 6 hours. So I think that's what it's talking about when it says societal standards. People kind of respect people not sleeping in order to sacrifice that sleep for working harder or accomplishing more in a day. So it's saying that social pressure also leads to people not getting enough sleep. Uneven economic opportunities and geographic mobility have led to the decline of traditional extended families and lifelong local communities. More than a quarter of U.S. adults live alone, and nearly half reported feeling lonely or excluded in a 2018 survey. So I guess this is going back to when they said we move less, sleep less, and have weaker bonds. That's explaining the weaker bonds. People don't live with or near their extended families, so they feel more lonely because they're more alone. Okay, next section. What you resist persists. Another problem is how we try to deal with anxiety. Because being anxious can be an uncomfortable and scary experience, we resort to conscious or unconscious strategies that help reduce anxiety in the moment. Watching a movie or TV show, eating, drinking, internet browsing, video game playing, dating apps swiping, and overworking. Smartphones provide a distraction at any time of day or night. Psychological research has shown that distractions serve as a common anxiety avoidance strategy. Okay, that's interesting. So it's saying that when we feel anxious, we look for distractions that are constantly available and avoid the anxiety. Okay, paradoxically, however, these avoidance strategies make anxiety worse in the long run. Being anxious is like getting into quicksand. The more you fight it, the deeper you sink. Indeed, research strongly supports Carl Jung's maxim that what you resist persists. From these two paragraphs, I can gather that trying to avoid dealing with our anxiety with distractions leads people to kind of getting more stuck in anxiety instead of actually getting over it. It's just like a Band-Aid response instead of really a cure or a way to deal with it. So I'm going to find a quote that best illustrates that point. So I'll pull this part right here with the examples. And then I kind of want the last part of it as well. So what I'll do is I'll add a dot, dot, dot. An ellipsis is a break in a text where you leave out some of what's in the middle of two parts of a text to make it shorter or just get the information you want. I'm going to start right here. Okay. So I think that using these two parts of the quote pulls all the information that I need. So I will leave my quote like that with the dot, dot, dot or ellipsis in the middle. And then again, put my in-text citation here. Okay. My clients' lives often become consumed with trying to manage anxiety at the expense of everything else. Their avoidance extends to more and more aspects of their lives so that, in the words of several clients, the world becomes so small and they're passing this problem on to their children. In almost 40 years of practice, I've noticed that people are becoming less tolerant of distress, said clinical psychologist Mary Albert, director of Albert, Baker & Associates in Maryland. Parents are more protective of their children, robbing kids of the opportunity to learn how to deal with stress, she said. So the new generation is growing up avoiding discomfort or pain until it becomes too much, and they become overwhelmed by it. Okay, so here's a third point that I think is important. So by avoiding discomfort and pain and kind of being overprotected or overprotective, when problems come up that deal with stress, people are less equipped to deal with it. So I'll add that quote as well. And remember, we don't want to have the period here, and we want parentheses around our in-text citation. Okay, the next section is remedies. The evolutionary mismatch hypothesis suggests several approaches for reducing anxiety. Disconnect occasionally from your electronic devices, move more, preferably in nature, sleep enough and without distractions, and prioritize in-person time with friends and family. Okay, that looks like a good quote. I might come back to it, but I'm going to read on to see what the rest of this section is first, because maybe there's an even better one. These changes need not be dramatic. Research shows that disconnecting from Facebook alone for a few days can lead to lower stress. If starting an exercise regimen sounds daunting, begin by walking a few minutes a day and gradually increase the time. Interrupting long periods of sitting with even short bursts of activity has proved to help. If sleep frequency eludes you, turn off all electronic devices at least an hour before bed and remove them from your room. Keeping your bedroom dark and cool will also promote good sleep. Finally, make a list of all the people who are important to you and with whom you've kept in touch only via social media for a while. Then call them and set up a time to meet. How can we stop dealing with our anxiety by distracting ourselves? Cognitive behavior therapy offers helpful suggestions. Notice when your body becomes tense and you feel the urge to escape by pulling out your phone or reaching for a drink. Then delay that escape for a few minutes. See what happens as your mind and body experience the discomfort. Repeat this each time you notice anxiety appearing, and try to delay the habitual responses longer and longer. You are likely to realize that anxiety is not as scary and won't last as long as you feared. Anxiety goes up and down like a wave. If you learn to surf it, it will never crush you. Most importantly, Albert said, this practice will help you build confidence that you can handle it. Okay, this looks like a different idea than this one, so I might want to pull a quote somewhere from here. When your discomfort prevents you from doing something that matters, gently push yourself beyond your comfort zone. For example, enter a crowded gathering even though you feel socially anxious. At first, you might only be willing to tolerate fear for just a little while, but over time, the tolerance muscle gets stronger, and you learn that you can do it, even if it's scary, said Marvin Goldfried, Distinguished Professor of Clinical Psychology at Stony Brook University. For people with serious anxiety problems or disorders, these and other cognitive behavioral therapy strategies should be implemented with the guidance of a mental health professional. For the rest, the answer is to let go of the struggle and stop attempting to control your emotions. As Jacqueline Nicole Johnston, an administrator at the University of Texas put it, I typically choose to attempt escaping my anxiety through shopping, happy hours, and going to movies. I no longer attempt to escape it. I now acknowledge it when it starts to creep up to the surface again, and I allow it to pass through instead of focusing on it. Okay, so that's the end of the article. And these are the two different reasons that I highlighted that I saw for remedies or ways to help with anxiety. So I'm going to pull quotes from this. I think this is still the best quote. This next section gives more specific examples, but I would like this more general one right here. So I'll put this here. And the last one, I think this part shows exactly what this researcher was saying, so I'll copy this and paste it in here as well. Okay, there you go. So we read through the article, pulled some quotes that are useful, and now I would go on to the next source. Happy researching.